I welcome everyone to the Asia Clean Energy Forum 2022 Deep Dive. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Melanie Slade, Programme Leader for the Emerging Economies Programme at the IEA for a scene-setting discussion around the energy crisis, green recovery and climate ambition. Melanie, don't know if you wanted to have a few words of welcome as well before kicking off your slide.
Thanks very much, Alison, and thanks to everybody, in particular, of course, ADB, for the opportunity to be at ASEF again. It's been a regular engagement for the last few years, and we really enjoy being part of this. And also, of course, making sure that the very important subject of energy efficiency gets its time in the sun. Alison and colleagues have put together a fantastic panel here, and I'm just going to give a bit of a brief scene setter in order to set some context for the conversation that we want to have here. So just to some scary news, I suppose, just to show where we are at the moment. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we have higher CO2 emissions than we've ever had before, so unprecedentedly high emissions. And this is even in the context of the very ambitious, of course, climate change objectives that people are setting, governments, civil society is setting around the world. So, not good news, of course. And one of the main factors for this continued increase is that as countries are recovering from the COVID crisis, the use of coal has increased as a cheap, at least first cost, if not total cost, fuel. So that's setting the context for the conversation today. The IEA, in order to try and work out how we can resolve these issues, the IEA has published targets and a scenario for how we could achieve net zero emissions globally. And this scenario has about 400 milestones in it. And about 10% of those, about 40 of those relate to energy efficiency. And the important thing about the energy efficiency milestones here are they're all needed. We need to take action on them in the near term, now, basically, and we need to be achieving the results from them by 2030. And the really important point to make here is we don't need to wait for new technologies. In fact, we have no time to wait. We have to act on these things now using the technologies we have available to us. And some of these will be talked about in a bit more detail, some of the buildings ones in particular. And of course, we'll start to talk about how we finance this transition. But the good news is if we do all of that, the global economy can grow by 40%, but without doing all of this, without making all of these changes, energy demand will be 30% higher. So there's a huge prize here to gain if we take all of these energy efficiency actions, but there's a huge penalty if we don't. It will make net zero probably unachievable at all, but certainly unaffordable. You can see on the hash bars here that there are huge energy efficiency opportunities in industry, transport, and of course buildings. It comes with that a need to triple investment in energy efficiency, which sounds quite alarming, but just to remember, these are cost-effective investments. All of these investments pay back over time. So it's not like the other investments that are being called for in clean energy transitions. These do actually recoup their costs for consumers, for businesses, for governments alike. Just to have a look at cooling, because we've been talking a lot about that in recent times. So it's one of the big increasing demands, particularly in the ASEAN region, the Asia region. About 50% of the new air conditioners between now and 2040 would be in Indonesia, China, and India combined. So massive growth just in kind of a small number of countries. And without any action, 40% of growth in electricity in buildings would come from space cooling, and that's 20% of global electricity growth in total. So, hugely important subject, and that's why we're pinpointing that in some of the presentations today. Important also to note that, again, we do have technologies that can help us reduce this growth in demand. We can double the efficiency of air conditioning in space air conditioning just by using current technologies. Things that are on our markets today, on the markets in your region, but they're just not being bought by consumers at the rate that they need to be bought, so they're available. Also, they don't necessarily cost more, and in many cases, it's possible that they can be made by local manufacturers. These are all things that stop governments from wanting to take stronger action on policies for improving things like air conditioners. But what we're saying here is there's every good reason to take these actions and no good reason not to. To try and facilitate this process, particularly in the Southeast Asia region, which is one of the biggest areas of growth, we've been working with the ASEAN Secretariat and the ASEAN senior officials, and also the ASEAN Centre for Energy on policy roadmaps. And we've got two. One focuses on cooling, which lays out the measures that governments can take, regulatory measures, information measures, and incentives that all need to be done together as a policy package in order to drive more efficiency in cooling. And then we have a similar policy package for buildings themselves. So once we've got, to make sure that the thermal performance of buildings, which is also a hugely important contributor, of course, of energy consumption and cooling, to make sure that that's optimized as well. And again, we have this policy package approach where we talk about regulation, information, and incentives. Many governments have some of these measures in place. Some governments have them all, but in all cases, they could be done more effectively, and they could be making greater savings than they are now. And if we were to do all of that, the important thing to note is that there are huge benefits, not just in terms of reduced energy consumption and emissions, but there are huge benefits that are real motivators for governments around the world. So governments may not care so much about energy efficiency. They may not care so much potentially about emissions reductions. But things like energy security are currently extremely important. Of course, they're always important, but they're very important now in the geopolitics we find ourselves in, with the hugely high prices we find ourselves with for energy. So things like energy security, bill savings, are hugely important. We also find that many governments are motivated by things that really affect the well-being of their citizens directly. So energy efficiency can contribute to health and well-being, improved air quality, poverty and alleviation. So these roadmaps that we've been working on actually lay out some of these opportunities for multiple benefits. And it's here where we hope that we can convince governments to actually take action, because they can see the benefits, hopefully, to not just to economies, but to people as well. And just one last point I'd like to make before I finish, and that is last week we had our 7th Global Conference on Energy Efficiency. And the unique thing, it was a great few days where governments came together to talk about what action could be taken. Experts had panels on things like cooling and financing. But the unique thing, there's something we've never been able to do before, is we had 26 governments get together and actually agree on what's now known as the Sonderberg Action Plan. This is framed around the policy package type approach I've just described. And these governments have agreed to work together on, accelerating action towards energy efficiency. And if people want to see the details of what's in that action plan, we can send the links around. But this is a really encouraging moment where we've got ministerial level, a focus on energy efficiency that I have to say we've never seen before. So with that, I'll end the introduction and hand back to Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie, for a wonderful scene-setting presentation. If okay, now we'll go to our kind of first session in the kind of pre-panel discussion. We have a recording from Peter Warren in Bays. Peter introduces himself on the recording, so I'll hand over to Lucas now, our communications expert, to set that up.
Morning, good afternoon and good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining around the world. It's fantastic to be back at the Asia Clean Energy Forum. Again, this is the fifth year I've been involved, and it's fantastic to be invited to speak on this important topic of energy efficiency. And I'll be focusing particularly on sustainable cooling within this really important topic for both the Asia Pacific region and the world. So just to introduce myself, I'm Peter Warren. I'm Head of Climate Innovation and Finance in the UK Government's Department of Business and Energy Industrial Strategy, where we look at delivering our international climate finance commitments, and I particularly work on the climate innovation part of those discussions. So today I'm going to speak a bit about how we're supporting sustainable cooling in aid eligible countries. But just to start off with, I thought it'd be really important just to highlight why innovation is an important topic in this debate and generally across clean energy transitions. So there's been a number of studies, including by the IEA, who are playing an important role in this workshop today, that about 35% of emissions reductions do need to come from technologies that are currently not at the commercial and market readiness stage. So there's a really important role for how do you not just support innovative technologies for example, space cooling and wider sort of cooling applications, but how do you sort of accelerate that rate of deployment? Because the average time is about 10 to 30 years for a new technology to get to market. There's a large range of initiatives out there that are looking at both energy efficiency more broadly, which we hear about a bit more in the workshop, and specifically on the topic of sustainable cooling, such as the Cool Coalition. Mission Innovation's been doing a lot of really great work under the Affordable Heating, Cooling Buildings Challenge. You would have followed the recent mission efficiency launch at the Sustainable Energy Forum recently. And more broadly on product efficiency, you may have seen the launch at COP26 of the product efficiency call to action. But in my intervention, I just wanted to briefly touch more about where the role of international climate finance fits into this discussion. And the UK recently raised its level of international climate finance to 11.6 billion over 5 years out to 2025 to 2026, and this comes from our aid budget that's specifically focused on climate mitigation and adaptation in aid eligible countries, including in the Asia Pacific region. Under this, we established a Sustainable Cooling Innovation Fund, which comes under a broader program called the Clean Energy Innovation Facility, and this really looks to accelerate the commercialization of innovative technologies for sustainable cooling, so including within buildings, including looking at space cooling, but not just buildings and space cooling, but more broadly as well across sectoral. So for example, looking at piloting natural refrigerants within air conditioners, within buildings, looking at ice storage, looking at district cooling, and a whole range of circular economy approaches as well. It's a really exciting fund, doing some really great things at the moment. And we've partnered with the IFC's Tech Emerge program, which is a really innovative model for how to deliver and commercialize innovative technologies across the world at scale. So I thought I just wanted to cover one case study in my short intervention of one project that we've been supporting under this fund, and we have about 20 to 30 projects so far under this wider fund. But in India, a really exciting technology by Greenchill, a refrigeration system to try and provide the sustainable cold storage capacity in India. It's an ongoing project, but it's been going for a couple of years now. What it's trying to do is really look at pilot switching to biomass renewables and natural refrigerants. And you can see a photo here of what this looks like in practice. But also it's important to collect as much data and research through the pilot phase of new technologies to see what's working and what's more challenging. So collecting data on life cycle emissions was really important. Some of the early impacts include fossil fuel electricity reduction by 90%, operating costs falling by 20%. And one of the areas of focus now is to get the payback time down even further, currently 6 years. Lots of really interesting lessons learned. And in our annual review that I put on the previous slide of our fund, if you want to find out more information about how this fund and some of the projects are doing, what have been some of the challenges, what are some of the opportunities, do look at that as well. Now that's the end of my short 5-minute intervention. I'm really looking forward to listening to the other speakers and sharing lessons and following up with everyone as well later. So thank you again for the invite.
I'll give thanks back to Peter. Now we have a wide and interested audience. If people do have questions, please do put them in the chat. If people do want to follow up with Peter and his colleagues on the programme and find out more about that example, again, if you post your email addresses in the chat, we will endeavour to pass that information on. So just to say, I know he is an intervention rather than a sort of discussion point, but I know that the Bays are keen for follow up and to find out and respond to any questions. And with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Ksenia, and Ksenia Pachenko is a policy analyst at the International Energy Agency, and Ksenia leads on our buildings energy efficiency work. Prior to working at the IEA, she was at ESCAP, doing lots of interesting work on space cooling in cities. And so welcome, Ksenia. We've just heard lots about energy efficiency in the context of recent geopolitical and energy security events, as well as climate change. As both Peter and Mel's presentations highlighted, cooling could be a key energy demand going forward. And so it'd be really good to hear from you about some of the shorter term and medium actions that energy efficiency could play. As Mel highlighted, some of these actions really need to happen in the next 10 years and they're cost-effective actions, but as well as opportunities for the longer term. Peter's introduced the word innovation, so anything innovative, anything digitalisation. We have two excellent digitalisation speakers coming along, so anything scene set in there would be great from that. I think you'll get a head up after a couple of minutes as well, so Ksenia, over to you.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for an excellent question. I think with the current energy crisis, and which was fueled obviously by the invasion of Ukraine, the importance for accelerated action on energy efficiency was very vividly put in the context of energy security, especially in countries which are heavily reliant on Russian fossil fuels. But I think both in short term and long term, as we also saw from Mel's presentation, the key principles for our action, if we want to get to net zero and ensure that clean energy transition is happening, really boils down to pretty much the same principles. I'll just put back on the slide on our net zero pathway, which IEA developed, highlighting some of the key milestones for building sector specifically. And you can see that the main principles which I'm talking about are really energy efficiency, electrification, and decarbonization, with behavioral changes and digitalization are able to play quite an important role both in mid-term and long-term. Our analysis also shows that the energy demand and floor area will be growing rapidly in the absence of ambitious energy policy action. And we also heard from Peter's presentation about the importance of cooling, especially in Asia region. Cooling plays a major role. It's one of the most fastest rapid growing end users among building end users. So if we don't act both on energy consumption, but also making sure that we're reducing peak demand, we are going to look at significant increases in energy and emissions in the future. The good news is that the building sector can get really close to net zero in terms of direct emissions with technologies which we already have today. And in net zero pathway, which you can see, we can reduce emissions from building sector by about 95% by 2050 through a combination of accelerated and large-scale implementation of energy efficiency, behavioral change, electrification of all end uses, use of renewables and other low carbon sources in the region. At the same time, rapid electrification and decarbonization of electricity, especially when we are increasing the share of variable renewables in the electricity mix, will put substantial pressure on the electricity grid and present challenges in balancing its load. And buildings will play a significant role in this. So in a net zero energy emission scenario, we estimate that by 2030, about 100 million buildings in the world will have residential PV system. So it's becoming really crucial to shift from looking at buildings as passive consumers of energy towards more active and connected players in the energy market, which brings us to the concept of efficient grid interactive buildings. So such buildings can produce, store, and even trade energy by means of smart technologies, which can help them to communicate more actively with the energy system and adapt its behavior in response to the signals. Such buildings have high performance envelopes, optimized design, very efficient appliances, which are key elements of, let's say, conventional energy efficiency in buildings. They're also able to respond to the signals from the grid to shift electricity consumption towards the times when electricity is the cleanest and the cheapest. So for example, when we have high levels of renewable energy production. And if we also look at synergies with other sectors, for example, if we couple such buildings with smart EV charging and batteries and energy storage, then we can store renewable energy and dispatch it as needed. Just to conclude, I want to emphasize that I don't think to make sure that these kind of buildings are being deployed on a wide scale, we need years of innovation. A lot of technologies already exist in the market. In this region, we're already seeing projects which are supporting these grid interactive buildings. We have projects on peer-to-peer energy trading, virtual power plants in various countries, 24/7 carbon-free, renewable energy certificates, and the commitments from a number of companies and businesses. So what we really need to make sure is that in the short term, we have more innovative approaches to policy development and implementation and business models so that we create the enabling environment for uptake of solutions like this. I'll stop here and back over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Ksenia. I'll head over to Prashant now, and then we might loop back with some sort of questions towards the end, some overarching ones from the panelists. So really pleased to welcome Prashant Kapoor. Prashant is a Chief Industry Specialist in Green Buildings and Cities at the International Finance Corporation. He's an entrepreneur who's created EDGE, Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies, to really mainstream resource-efficient buildings in emerging economies. He's currently leading the Apex Green Cities program that supports cities to transition to low carbon and resource-efficient growth pathways. So welcome, Prashant. My question is to you, I'm really interested to hear more about the EDGE program. I think it ties in really well with the discussion points we've had so far about the need for smart to efficient buildings. And then we're going to add on two extra asks, but hopefully I think they'll be covered in the framework. One is around what would need to happen in the next years to make these 2030 efficiency goals more achievable. So if there's any asks you would have of a policymaker to ramp up something like EDGE, I think it'd be great to get your thoughts on that. And then the other one is, for me, EDGE seems to speak to regulation, information and incentives. It seems to tick all of the boxes. So insights there, for Melanie's policy package approach, when we talked about the IEA's policy package approach, you could see that there are elements there, and I think EDGE speaks to those. So please do start off with EDGE, and if you have time, we'll cover those sort of two last things. One about actually how could action be ramped up in the really shorter term for those 2030 goals, and the other one is kind of the linkages along the lines of regulation, information and incentives. So over to you, Prashant.
Great, nice to be here. Thanks, Alison. Just one quick point actually on what Ksenia presented. The buildings look really tiny compared to the rest of it, but I think the large chunk, majority of the electricity use is in buildings. So, as one of the largest, actually the largest global development institution focused specifically on private sector, a lot of that is in buildings. This is a really important aspect that we wanted to tackle. What we found was it wasn't so much the technology that was the problem actually, or the finance for that matter. The buildings do get financed, right? That's why we see so much of it, right? But essentially, there were two main barriers. One was perception of greening cost. Perception is about 30%. The reality is more like 1 to 2% of construction costs. That's one key one that the market feels. The second is the circular blade, which is very unique to buildings. So unlike say agribusiness or industry, you have many players and each one blades the other. I can go into the details if you have any questions, but those were the two big conundrums we had to solve. And with that in mind, we really had to come up with something that was analytical, that was exchangeable across the circular blade people, the stakeholders, and brings about this conscious awareness that greening doesn't cost much as they imagine at least. So, and that's what led us to create the tool. I'll share my screen. Could you just point your finger, raise your thumb if you can see it, Alison? Could you? I can't see you, but okay. Okay, great. Yes, so essentially we created EDGE. I won't go into too much detail, and you can have a look at this on edgebuildings.com. But broadly, our intention was to really allow the developers, the clients, to quickly figure out what works in their buildings, what difference it makes in terms of energy savings, water savings, even embodied energy and embodied carbon, and most importantly, how much will it cost? Because if we don't bring that, how much will it cost, we would have really not convinced them. That's one. The second was, we realized actually a little later that we have to come to this validation aspect, this circular blade. Trust is a big issue in developers, right? Do you really trust a claim from a developer? So we launched the EDGE certification. It scaled up quite nicely across the world. Particularly through COVID, it's been a boom. So it's it's still a mystery why it has scaled up right through COVID, and actually the majority of it. And essentially, we ourselves have done about $6-7 billion of financing using EDGE. And I think people like your ADB and others have also done many projects across. So this has allowed the market to have a clear commodity that they can use across as an exchange. And to answer your second question about zero carbon, I think the idea is that, policy changes, we need, government to help push and create the stock. We need incentives to drive, especially the conservative banks to go forward. And thanks to the UK government and the MAGIC program, we have some concession funds that we use in this space. And finally, but most importantly, developers have to be convinced in terms of the market case. Because if it's all about saving the planet, we won't make much headroom. So we really have to be about private sector making a marketing sort of differentiating factor for them. I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. And I think we'll come back to you at the end with a finance question after we've heard from Charlotte and Nikitan. So next up, I have Charlotte Wang. Welcome, Charlotte, who's a founder and CEO of eQuota Energy Technology. I'll let you tell us more about eQuota in a second, but Charlotte is an advocate of big data, energy management, and has rich experience in clean power technology industry in China, USA, Germany, Russia, and many other countries. Charlotte has been listed as a Cartier Women Initiative winner, Asian New Energy Leader, and Echoing Green Climate Change Fellow. Charlotte, welcome. Equota Energy is offering some very interesting smart energy management solutions, and it would be great to hear about the approaches you're using, especially in terms of the comments and the discussion points we've had so far. So anything that's relevant to the points that you've heard, please do build on that. And we're also really keen to find out more about the products you have that speak to energy efficiency optimization. So as you can see, it's a key theme today. There's one thing, I think this ties in with Mel and Prashant's comments about information. And that is really the second question coming in here. But I know you're really keen on data visualization. So data visualizations of the quota management system would be really interesting to find out more about how that's used as a tool to engage with stakeholders, whether that's the people implementing the change, whether it's showing off the kind of the accessibility and the usability of the tool. So I won't speak anymore, but Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be invited to speak at this event. I'm an engineer by training, so when I found the Equota and then from US moved back to China, we really focus on to serve energy intensive manufacturing and utility. We provide energy optimization, powered equipment, health management, then carbon management together. We're really glad. By the time when we started the company, carbon management was not really hot in China, but last year was carbon neutral commitment really bring a lot of doors for us. So we started serving from the energy demand side. We start with the buildings energy optimization, then move into the manufacturing. So right now we served world largest steel enterprise, Ball Steel in a BASF, largest chemical enterprise, as well as China Coal, the largest coal chemical enterprise. Last year we started working for State Grid and Southern Grid. We really get into utility. We really get a chance to serve all those players using data analytics to further understand their insights to obtain the optimization results. I have prepared a very simple slides and then just to give everyone understanding about what we do. And then when I established the business, it was really impact-driven business in our mind. What we're looking at is how we could serve the area. So what I mentioned a few information there, and then we really look at our product, the smart energy carbon management platform could serve in those areas. One is the platform as the impact, the optimization product, Omni, and then predictive maintenance, SEMI. And then this are directly to reduce energy consumption, carbon, and plant downtime, and fatalities. That is one thing we learned. Besides we improved energy efficiency, they're also directed to human resource. We could save up to 70% in those critical environment. And then we also learned people in the younger generation are no longer interested in working in this field. So it's a good push away to moving into a digital transformation. So this is the impact-driven business besides the financial return what we're looking at. So we have a quantitative and qualitative measurement and achievement. By now, we already reduced over 8 million tons of carbon. What does that mean? That means for the entire Shanghai, it is over 26 million population. You have the entire population not using any transportation for 2 months. So that is a very proud result we're achieving. And then we committed to reduce 1 million tons of carbon for each enterprise since starting the next year. And then it's really a data-driven. When we look at, and then this chart is pretty much to showing where we started. We started from right side to the energy demand side. And there are a few our key customers. We started with like a new world group on the buildings. and then we directly save their energy over 15% with our non-intrusive analytics and optimization tool. Then we move into the grid, and then we also have demand from market from the generation side, those coal-fired power plants. What we learned, the carbon data are truly depend on those energy data, and those energy data are depend on those operation data. So when we serve the client with our the predictive maintenance, we call the very free service. So we help them to reduce unplanned downtime. We earn the trust, and then we move into the optimization. They all wanted different kinds of the optimization, and then this is so we're able to save roughly between 3 to 5% for the manufacturing. That's a very significant improvement for them. Then we look at the whole platform impact, how much we can convert it, those energy consumption, the carbon reduction to the asset for them to look at for either electricity trading or the carbon asset trading. So this is a very interesting market we're in, and we truly believe that with the right technology, it could be leapfrog and then to obtain the results and then help the climate change. That's what, yeah. That's what I have now. Yeah.
Charlotte. And as I understand it, the focus is on industry and the private sector, or you mentioned the public sector as well. Who are your kind of key markets at the moment and kind of how that might change over time?
Oh, we don't put as a private market and then public sector to differentiate. We really look at our target customer based on are they energy intensive, the either manufacturing or utility, and then what is their data volume. So those are the key players. Like some key players in the industry are private sector, like a chemical area. And then for the steel, what we encountered are definitely the public sector state-owned enterprise. So for us, they are looking for the solution to reach the immediate results. So so far we are very happy for both sector, but primarily we have a lot of state-owned enterprise using our solutions.
Brilliant, thank you, Charlotte. And now over to Yigatan. Yigatan is the co-founder and chief technical officer of SenseGreen, which involves looking at new technologies and the development of Internet of Things products. While working at Yigatan, he worked as a researcher on a smart building project, Simba Best. And so we've been talking a lot about smart solutions and kind of digital technologies and innovation. And we know that you're developing smart solutions to reduce carbon emissions from buildings. Could you talk a bit more about that in terms of the building sector, but specifically in the region? And also, again, we've started talking about digitalization. So the relationship between more conventional energy efficiency and the role of digitalization going forward. So Yigatan, if you'd like to speak to a couple of minutes to those, and then I'll come in with a second question.
Yeah, thank you, Alison, for the question. And it's a big honor to speak in this panel with all these important panelists. I'm İlcan Yeşilata and CTO and the co-founder of SenseGreen. I'm based in Ankara, Turkey. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So as all you know, buildings are slow-paced environments, and they are not like our smartphones, which we use averagely 3 years, or not like our computers, which we use averagely 4 years. But buildings have an average lifetime of nearly 40 years. So we have a huge existing building stock that needs to be more sustainable, healthier, and energy efficient. So we experienced that not every building has an equal chance to create this energy transition. And some building management, for example, some building management lacks the funds to retrofit the structure and make it more efficient. And also sometimes there are mechanical and structural limitations on adoption of new technologies in some buildings. However, in recent years, we saw that the new technologies can have an impact on the digitalization of existing building. And we really believe that startups can take very important role on this transition. We at SenseGreen are highly committed to digitalization and democratization of energy efficiency in buildings, because energy efficiency should be reachable for all type of buildings, for all type of people. We believe that even a one-story school building in a rural area without a facility management team or any technological infrastructure should have the chance to start energy efficiency transition. To democratize the building digitalization, we apply a four-step technology to buildings. The first step is monitoring, because obviously you cannot improve if you don't track your progress. And the wireless technologies with ultra low power consumption and wide area networks open up a lot of possibilities for us. With these wireless environmental sensors and energy meters, we can digitalize buildings without needing any technological infrastructure or installation work or cabling work. And just in hours, we are able to start to get data all over the building, and we are able to track our real-time energy consumption. And after we start to get data all over the building, the next step is obviously to visualize and share this information with facility management team and as well as the building occupants. Facility management teams want to be able to access data on their mobile app or on their web browser, and they just want to take immediate action on the problem based on the data. Another step, also after the COVID, especially after the COVID, we see that building occupants want transparency about their building's air quality level. And we noticed a trend of sharing this data with occupants in real time. And so the building occupants are able to track their building performance, their building health, and the health level of their building. And also, after visualizing this data, another step is analyzing this data to create decisions that make buildings more energy efficient and sustainable. Artificial intelligence can transform the data collected all over the building, and it can understand the pattern of the building, and it can detect the faults in the HVAC management, and it can take the decisions based on the dynamic environmental conditions like outdoor weather, like indoor conditions, and based on the occupant behavior. After we got the decisions to optimize operations, we need to control units based on them. But despite all of the advancement on top of the building management system, only the 3% of buildings in the United States have building management system to control units. All the cabling and installation works make BMS expensive tool to use in building. But in this point, we experience that wireless control devices are becoming more popular in recent years. Without needing any BMS or cabling or installation work, you can start to install these devices directly to HVAC units, and they give opportunity to apply artificial intelligence decisions on HVAC units. With these 4 steps of technology adoption, we create energy transition in commercial buildings. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are really dedicated to start a large-scale energy transition for buildings that do not have many opportunities to adopt these new technologies. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alison.
Thank you. That's super interesting, and interesting the point around air quality and how that ties in with Mel's comments about multiple benefits and how COVID kind of highlighted that. And the second question, I'm sorry, I have to come in quickly, but is you talk about the installation of SenseNode, and it's relatively quick and straightforward to implement. Are these solutions suitable for all countries, all kinds of buildings? And what do you see are, what conditions make things easier, what conditions make things harder? And yeah. So there are any insights and maybe some of the more challenges and challenges?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned at my presentation, we are mostly focused on the existing small and medium-sized buildings that don't have enough technological infrastructure. But we are mostly focused on the Middle East and Southeast Asia region, where you need to cool down the building almost during the whole year, especially with the increasing regulations for net zero goals of the governments in these regions, and increasing energy prices puts facility management teams under the pressure. Also, the public pressure on keeping buildings healthier after COVID pushed them to look some solutions regarding digitalization. most of the time managing the building HVAC operations in tropics like Southeast Asia or hot climates like Middle East is very similar to managing a huge philharmonic orchestra, because you need to keep the balance between the energy consumption, temperature, humidity, different parameters of air quality, capacity of your system, and you need to manage all these parameters in a harmony. So usually facility management teams don't have enough time to analyze different parameters of their building, and they manage based on their general experience. But that's why they need to take steps about the technology adoption. But one of the main challenges we faced, facility management teams usually have lower budgets to invest in new technologies compared to other departments. Therefore, they usually need to demand an extra budget from the landlord or tenants to implement this new solution. But the decision cycle and the financing of these projects can be quite complicated sometimes. And therefore, we sometimes see the tendency for long sales cycles for this kind of solution. But I'm very happy to hear something more about the financing of energy efficiency solutions in this panel, because I believe the alternative financing solutions would make a great impact to spread these kind of technologies.
Thank you, Yiğitan. That is very timely, because I'm going to go back to Prashant and get his views from a finance perspective on what he's heard so far. And it would really be good, again, to get your insights about what could be done to ramp up action over the next 10 years. And interestingly, on your last slide, when you were talking about EDGE and the take-up of EDGE, despite COVID, but we know there's been lots of interest in retrofitting of buildings. So I did wonder if there was any opportunities there. So speak broadly and then maybe give some insights to that. And also, this is a question to everyone. So once Prashant's finished, Charlotte, Ksenia, others, please have your thinking hats on too.
Thanks, Alison. Financing and investing in green buildings broadly is a huge opportunity. Our calculation shows it's about 2.24 trillion, let's say $25 trillion opportunity. And if you ask how much is actually happening overall in climate, not just the buildings, it's meager 0.6 trillion. So, it's not even 2.5% of what just the buildings need in emerging markets. So it's very little is happening, but the signs are good. Things are moving. Particularly, so I would actually break this, as you suggested, Alison, into new construction and an existing one. New is fairly easy because they are already financed, and it's a matter of, if you imagine this to be a river, it's a matter of diverting the finance to go in the right way, right? So a bit like it's not as tricky as renewable energy. And the kind of mechanisms we are seeing in the market, particularly from the financial institutions, are three specific ones. I hope you can see my screen. One is to influence the construction of buildings themselves. And this is a fairly, reasonably easy thing to do, because developers are looking for financing. A lot of times they raise it from financial institutions and investors. So, and it's just a matter of getting them getting them technical capacity, getting them cognizant of any discounts and any of those aspects. That sort of works. The other more underutilized aspect is green mortgages, particularly from the retail side. And here is really the opportunity, because majority of the buildings, this is, which is really the forgotten aspect, is that 80% of all buildings are homes. They're not offices, right? So if you're going to go after homes, you have to deal with mortgages, whether it's home equity loans or mortgages. And by having clever products that show, lowering of risk, higher repayments, just saving energy bills, if you can show that you save $20 a month on a greener home, that could be accommodated into the mortgage, right? To make it green mortgage, essentially. And I can go into the details later of the question. But those kind of products, we have done a few of these in Asia, in LAC, it's really taken off, Latin America. But this has to be the way, in fact, this has to be the way all mortgages should be done, frankly. And lastly, getting financial institutions, particularly banks, really excited about capital markets using bonds or sustainable bonds or green bonds, is important, because it allows them to borrow money from the wider investor base and to get the kind of presence that they need, right, to kind of show themselves off a little bit. And also allows them to kind of get greener credit facilities, green securitization, and all of that, right? And I can go into that a little bit more. But just that's really on the new construction. On the existing, it's a much harder problem to crack. And I think, I'm afraid, we really are not doing enough in the industry. And I think, there are lots of reasons for that. I mean, the ticket sizes are smaller, upgrading is a smaller amount. There's a lot of disruption that happens to the clients, that is, the tenants, that has not been worked out. Escrows are very few and far between, and they're not very creditworthy a lot of times. And that really has to be cracked. But broadly speaking, financial institutions are not really lending, are very reluctant at best, lending to financing energy efficiency upgrades. There are projects, but they're very few. But what we want to see more of, and possibly governments and DFIs like us should do more, is sort of looking at instruments beyond the usual ways, like on-bill utility finance or property assessed clean energy finance. It's been quite successful in the US, kind of looking at those kind of models. We are testing out some models called green microfinance, where smaller homes, particularly in the semi-urban areas, that they can use to kind of raise money and to retrofit the homes. And lastly, I'll end with this. Actually, I think one thing that we find on the existing buildings is to approach large property owners, like REITs, large asset owners, to get them to have transition finance, a bit like you would do for decarbonization aspect. And we're beginning to see some good signs there, where we can provide sustainable linked loans or sustainable linked bonds to help them transition down to zero carbon, and offer some sort of incentive to make that happen. I know I've been quite cryptic and kind of stretching this quite far, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of things that are happening, but not enough, is the main message.
Thank you so much, Prashant. And I could hear smiling and nodding from some of our other panelists. Lucas, a quick check-in. As I understand it, we're running out of time and we'll be going to the next session. Yeah. Prashant, I think there may well be some follow-up emails from our panelists, but thank you, and thanks to you, and thank you to everyone for a really interesting session. Thank you. And next session is on finance. I hope you see your faces there too. So thank you, and welcome to the second panel in this session. I don't know if the panelists got a chance to hear the previous session, but it was super interesting and really set the framework looking around the need for smart and efficient buildings in the short and longer term. I'm going to kick off with Gloria Girello-Teknomo, who's a Senior Transport Sector Officer at the East Asia Department of the Asian Development Bank. Gloria is a civil engineer and transport planner by training, and she has led projects on energy efficiency, intelligent transport systems, public transport, and low carbon emission projects. She's coordinated and produced knowledge projects on sustainable infrastructure in East Asia. Gloria, if you want to kick off with a framing question, and then we've got kind of a deeper question as well. We've got around 5 to 6 minutes for each slide, but we're going to try and loop back. So I've got some questions that speak to you and Russell, for example. So please be mindful of the time. And Lucas, who's been our IT superhero, is giving people a heads up when they're running short on time. So the first question is, which instruments and initiatives does ADB use in China to mobilize finance for energy efficiency? So if you want to speak to that for a couple of minutes. And then the second question is really around, the boosting of finance. We've heard a lot in the kind of first panel around the scale of the challenge, what needs to happen in the next years, the importance in finance and taking that forward. So we're talking about, the second question really is around, private sector investments, and what best practices can you share in leveraging private green finance? And the first question speaks to kind of your current approach, and then the second one is really about any best practice examples that you have. So over to you, Gloria.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you for the introduction. I would like to present actually the energy efficiency projects in the People's Republic of China. So let me share my slide. Can you see it? Okay, so actually prior to 2015, China's air quality has deteriorated to a dangerous level. So to support its effort in improving air quality and to achieve net zero, ADB has approved loans worth more than $2.8 billion from 2015 to 2020 for energy efficiency and air quality improvement projects. While large state-owned enterprises are dominant in the PRC, the Chinese economy is fundamentally composed of about 80 to 90% small and medium-sized enterprises, and they are high polluting. So ADB targeted financing energy efficiency projects for SMEs because, number one, they lack the capacity and the familiarity with latest energy efficient technologies. And in line with, they also have difficulties in accessing commercial credit or commercial debt financing. So in line with ADB Strategy 2030, China's 5-year plans and the international treaties on climate change and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, ADB's objectives are to assist the PRC into environmentally sustainable growth, and to reduce carbon emissions and energy intensity from high polluting industries and SMEs, and to reduce financing barriers for SMEs and ESCOs, as well as to improve the capacity and deployment of best practices and high-level technologies for energy efficiency. So to answer your question, actually, Alison, we have several financial instruments to assist SMEs to reduce their carbon intensities. First, ADB provides technical assistance and grants to strengthen capacity of these SMEs to lower their energy intensity and greenhouse gas emissions. Also, ADB uses the financial intermediation loan or FIL modality in financing energy efficiency projects to maximize the development impact by leveraging the different sources of co-financing from domestic resources such as commercial banks and private investors and other development partners. Financial intermediation loan also provides a mechanism to provide green financing to SMEs with high energy saving and pollution reduction potential. In at least 8 of our projects in China, our counterparts, the financial intermediaries, have set up clean energy financing platform or facilities where the ADB loan is on lent to eligible sub-borrowers. These sub-loans can be in the form of debt financing or entrusted loans, or as a form of guarantee or collateral for commercial bank loans, or provide financial leasing for procurement of high-level technology equipment for energy efficiency. Recently, the financial intermediaries in our projects provide flexible financing instruments such as equity financing, where the ADB loan can be invested in the form of equities to other sub-funds, regional, local, or industry funds, which promote energy efficiency and improvement of air quality. The FIL also supports developing a credit enhancement mechanism or scheme to support the issuance of clean air bonds, which is aligned with international standards. These are our most recent projects. So our financial intermediaries help their sub-borrowers to issue clean air bonds to help mitigate pollution and improve air quality. So our projects have leveraged about 2 to 3 times our loan amounts to finance energy efficiency projects towards a low carbon and sustainable path. So the promotion, some of the lessons that we have learned are, number 1, promotion and demonstration of innovative business models and low carbon technologies is essential. And flexible financial modalities are successful in leveraging financing for energy efficiency projects. And of course, there should be a strong ownership and professional project management team in our financial intermediaries to be able to support project implementation. That's all for now. I will answer your second question later, or do you want me to answer it now?
No, if you want to come in quickly, if you did have some sort of high-level insights, that would be great. But if not, we'll loop back towards the end of the session. So maybe we go into Russell when we come back, because I think we might have a bit of time at the end of the session and come back to you. So now, welcome to Russell Wong. Russell's an investment professional at SUSE Partners and a demonstrated track record in investing in renewable energy projects in Southeast Asia. He's done lots in the region looking at microgrids and energy efficiency, and he's got a background in market and acquisitions and corporate finance. So you're very much in the right place today. So Russell, your first question, SUSE Partners is an infrastructure fund manager looking at the global energy transition. Despite the key role of energy efficiency in taking forward this transition, and we've seen that really come through, especially in the first panel discussion, financing efficiency is still one of the biggest challenges, and there's often the focus on renewable energy. How do you promote investments in energy efficiency in the region? And so insights there. And there's another question which I think I'd quite ask you about, the importance of collaboration. So we're also really interested to your workings with ESCOs in the regions, again, lessons learned, best practice. And Gloria, I would quite like to come back with you because I know ADB collaborates with lots of governments, obviously. And so understanding your perspectives on collaboration would both be really good. So first to Russell, and talk a bit more about SUSE and how you kind of take forward energy efficiency investment in the region. And then a question on collaboration, and Gloria, I'll come back to you. So Russell, please take the floor.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for the introduction. I think I'd like to say a quick word on SUSE Partners. So SUSE Partners is a global infrastructure private equity investor. We manage north of 1.7 billion euros at this point. And we've actually been looking at energy efficiency investments for coming to a decade now. So we like to think that we do have the experience and we do have seen most of the plays in this space. That said, energy efficiency is really nascent in Southeast Asia, and I think at this point it's still very much a private sector play, which is why we're here. I've actually prepared a slide that I'll throw up on the screen very quickly. But Gloria, I think your slide is still on the screen, if you don't mind sort of letting me control the screen. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just talk through my points. So energy efficiency is still very much a private sector play at this point. We see most governments and, okay, sorry, let me just share my screen. Should be fine. It's very wordy, I'll just talk through the points. So we see most governments in Southeast Asia try to keep up with increasing consumption, while at the same time trying to keep their reliance on fossil fuels low. These are all very additive measures, right? We need to remember that, we need to remember and recognize that the cleanest and the greenest megawatt hour is actually the megawatt hour that's not used. And that's reduction in consumption, being more efficient in how we use energy. And that's energy efficiency in a nutshell. And these are typically smaller ticket investments. I know we've seen a lot of panelists come on and they've discussed building green buildings, right? Net zero buildings from the ground up. But we also need to remember that there are so many factories, there are so many buildings out there that can use retrofitting and that can use energy efficiency measures like HVAC. It can even be as simple as replacing the lights in the building. These are smaller ticket items that typically can be anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000, right? Banks are quite hesitant to finance these because one, the capex is too small, and secondly, the concept of the off-taker or the client paying for these systems using savings is not so attractive to them. So that's where we come in. We finance these projects with the energy service companies. We take it off the books for off-takers and clients. For example, factories, buildings, they don't pay any upfront capital, right? We pay for it. We own these projects, these energy efficiency measures, and the client and off-takers still gets to enjoy the energy savings. So that's how we typically operate in the region. I think there was another question on, sorry, what was the second part of the question, Alison?
Collaboration. So it was saying about how do you collaborate with energy service companies? What learnings do you have from this? How could this really be replicated? So your kind of lessons learned on working with others.
Okay, so we are very much private equity investors. We work with development partners. Sometimes we can invest in these development partners as well. But what we like to do is we like to invest and acquire projects from them. We do have a couple of development partners on the ground that have projects, but they don't necessarily have the capital to deploy these projects. We can finance them, we can equity finance them up front so that they don't have to worry about where they're going to get the capital from to deploy these projects. It's very bespoke how we work with them. These investments, I guess, are structured according to their requisite requirements, their needs, and the types of projects that they're doing. We can help with the assessment of financial viability. We can help with transaction structuring. We can help with ESG reviews of projects. We typically have really high standards of ESG that we like to sort of pass along. So yeah, in a nutshell, these are all very, I guess, bespoke investments. And what we'd like to do is we like to sort of help developers get projects out the door. We like to help them with their issues with financing, right? We equity finance it. And I think I've heard a lot of panelists come on before me. And the common theme is that they're having issues with financing. Typically, I think banks will only finance at scale. And that's what we can do, right? We are the equity stopgap, and we try to aggregate projects to gain scale. And once we get scale, we can go to the banks and we can get project finance for these for the portfolio. And I see Gloria nodding. Gloria, we we would like some. We could potentially have a conversation on how we can sort of finance these projects out the door on a smaller ticket basis. But that's probably a conversation for offline.
Yeah, you can send me an email.
I have to admit, I always think it's a good show of a good panel with people going to follow up conversations afterwards. I think we may have a bit more time for each of the panelists because I think we're one panelist down. So Gloria, I don't know if you wanted to come back with any high level feedback about collaboration. We've also got a question coming from the audience around the difference in terms of uptake from small, medium enterprises to the various products. For example, equity financing is more popular as compared to guarantees. But I don't know if Russell and Gloria, you want to come in with that, and Arjun and Eri, you want to keep that one in mind in your kind of presentations back. So Gloria, if you want to come back on collaboration and any thoughts and sleeves, and then Russell, if you had any kind of insights there as well. So Gloria, back to you.
Yes, basically collaboration is very important, especially in financing small and medium-sized enterprises. As I've mentioned before, we set up actually our clients or the Chinese government in several cities. We have several projects in several provinces that they have set up a clean energy financing facility. So from this facility, we give the loan to this facility, and our intermediaries will on-lend them to the sub-borrowers. So our sub-borrowers or the loans, there's the sub-loans for energy efficiency projects are basically, some of our projects are cooling and heating systems for a university town using geothermal source. Other projects are green buildings. Other projects are solar powered and or LED street lighting. Those are typical projects that our financial intermediaries finance. So basically, we on-lend ADB loan. The ADB loan on-lends to these small sub-borrowers. So collaboration between the factory owners, the sub-borrowers is very important to be able to implement the project successfully. Another important thing is, of course, the enabling environment in the province or in the country for flexible financing modalities. So without this enabling environment, without these policy reforms for new financial products, we will still go into traditional financing. But right now in China, they have innovative financial products that are coming online. So we can make use of these innovations to be able to finance the small and medium-sized or micro industries as well. So collaboration is very important. And to answer the question in the chat box, basically my experience in China is the sub-borrowers usually use debt financing. In some of our projects, they use debt financing instead of guarantee financing. That is easier in terms of transaction cost and so on. And right now, equity financing is getting some mileage. So we have leveraged in some of our projects, we have leveraged financing and got financing from other development partners, such as the German development banks and African development banks and other private investors that have also pulled their fund into the facility to be able to on-lend to sub-borrowers for energy efficiency projects. Over to you.
Gloria. Thank you, Gloria. That was super interesting. I think I'll come back to this question at the end once we've had Arjun and Eri, because I think, Russell, you will have some insights as well. And I think you might get a few more questions speaking to the theme. So I'd really like to welcome Arjun Gupta. He started Smart Joules in 2014 to make energy savings simple, substantial and profitable for large businesses and through energy efficiency as a service. Again, he's an expert on digital technology innovations. He's on a mission to eliminate energy waste. He also serves on the executive council of the leading non-profit organisation focusing on energy efficiency in India, the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. And then there's lots more, but to kick off, Arjun, Smart Joules makes the upfront investments in necessary equipment, and it receives a percentage of the savings achieved from their clients. So I've skipped a bit. So Arjun, the business model of Smart Joules allows your companies to thrive in a market dominated by super ESCOs. You started with Joule Pays, which is really a pay as you save model. Then you introduced the as a service business model from Joule Cool, which is cooling as a service. And then you introduced Joule Air, which is compressed air as a service. And you use a range of digital solutions. What's the unique features of your business model that have led to the success? And we're particularly interested in the kind of the initial challenges in terms of creating trust in the business model, how the finance was mobilized, any administrative and contractual procedures. So Arjun, the floor is yours, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Could you just confirm that you can hear me? Okay, perfect. Great. So lots of questions in there. I'll try to do justice to them. Thanks for asking them. You know, our job as a company is to make energy saving simple and substantial and profitable for other businesses, as you mentioned, Alison. So our models, our business models are tailored to deliver that. So the first one, Joule Pays, pay as you save. Then there's a cooling as a service. And you mentioned Joule Air, which is for compressed air as a service. The common value proposition, as you'll see across all these models, is that there is a guaranteed long-term performance assurance from us under all of these models. There is an investment that we make in the client sites for energy savings. There is good technology that we bring, digital technologies and others, to enable continuous optimization of energy, not just one time, but on a continuous basis. And then the fees that we charge are very closely linked to performance. So these are some common elements of all the business models that we have. The only differences are basically how do you do a baselining and how do you actually charge the customer for savings, for verified savings. But these common characteristics are there in all the models. Then another thing that is common in all the models is the combination of various ways to save energy. Traditionally, you may have, traditionally ESCOs have been companies that finance equipment. And, we made a very important early decision to bundle different ways of saving energy into our solutions. So the way we see it, energy can be saved in 4 main ways. One is design, one is using energy efficient equipment, and third is operational optimization, and the fourth is improving behavior. So we really focus on 3 of them, which is design, equipment, and operations. Behavior is a little difficult to address. But the combination of these 3 different areas is what makes energy efficiency extremely profitable. If you look at only equipment financing, that will only give you an X% savings, and usually the payback periods are higher. But when you look at design interventions and operational interventions, the investments required are smaller, and the savings that you get are very handsome. So in all our models, we combine these elements as well, not just new energy efficient equipment. Now, there were a couple of questions in there about how we started off and how we got our first financing, our first customer, etc. So, one thing that we did early on is, we backed ourselves before anybody else backed us. We didn't go out in the market looking for financing at all. What we said was we are going to focus on a customer. We have to get a customer as fast as possible and establish a success story for others to look at. Because, if we went to the branded facilities, the big brands, nobody would give us a chance. So what we did was we focused on how do we acquire a customer fast. So we went to our network, personal network, leveraged the network, found somebody who knew us and trusted us, and they gave us our first project. Then we only focused on making that project successful and getting cash flow started in that project. Only once the cash flows and the model was established, did we go to a financing institute and said, hey, look, this is the project that is working, not something that is pie in the sky, not something that may happen in the future, but this project is already implemented, the cash flows are already coming, now give us a loan for this project. That made the financing extremely simple, right? You're not telling somebody a story that may happen, you're telling them invest in a project which is already generating cash. So, so I would say a couple of things again, and to summarize, first is focus on a customer who you can convince easily. Otherwise, sales cycles can be very long, establish early success. And then also make it easier for the financing people by showing them a project which is already generating cash. And you have to back yourself early on. You have to take a risk on yourself that others, you're instead of spending time to convince others to take the risk on you, for the first one or two projects, you take the risk, and that's what we did over here. Was there anything that I missed out to respond to? I'm happy to do that as well.
Oh, Arjun, that was super interesting. And I think the kind of message about starting small and doing well as kind of like taking that forward rather than expecting top-down investment is a really good and pertinent one. If okay, I'll move on to Eri and then come back with questions for yourself. I think there's some emerging as well. Brilliant, thank you. So I'd like to welcome Eri Wirjaha, is a senior analyst in Climate Policy Initiative Indonesia office, where he leads work on the energy sector. He particularly provides support on innovative financing instruments and scaling up financing for renewable energy and energy efficiency. Prior to joining CPI, Eri worked for more than 10 years of the integration of Indonesian energy and environment sectors, working as both an academic and a consultant. So Eri, the quick question to you is, we debated whether or not to have you at the beginning or at the end, because I think that you speak to both points. But international discussions on the clean energy investments often mention the need for investment. So I think we've sort of acknowledged some of those challenges throughout the two panel discussions. In the role of leveraging public finance or using different blended finance instruments. Could you share some of the insights from the Climate Policy Initiative on what has been applied and what has worked in the region in terms of the role of de-risking? So over to you, Eri, if you want to speak to that first.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alison. Before we going further about what kind of the de-risking instrument that's appropriate to address the challenges of energy efficiency transaction in the regions, I probably will focus first on the obstacle of the energy efficiency investment, and probably one of the most important features is about the business model that's been applied in the regions, facing a lot of circumstance and uncertainty among the potential client and also potential lenders. Therefore, Climate Policy Initiative and also DANFOS trying to readdress that. If we say that it is a traditional business model, probably, then we, together with DANFOS, is global manufacturers in the energy efficiency part, we're working together to develop and redesign a business model on the energy efficiency. So what we see most often is that the challenges of the energy efficiency implementation on the energy on the financial access, how most of the ESCOs in the regions working in the as the startup company, they don't have enough collateral, but they reach with the knowledge about technology. But this is not sufficient to convince the potential lenders to provide them financings. And also, in perspective of the potential clients, that the variety of the energy efficient technology, creating uncertainty about whether the technology will perform well if they should be borrowing money from the lenders, and also arguing about and debating about the potential performance of the energy efficiency that finally the client will responsible to pay all of the installment and also let's say interest to the bank. So we develop what's called the innovative business model, while DANFOS work together with the bank partners and providing backup to the ESCO about the financings, and we provide non-collateral loan because the bank was providing what's called it as the reputational risk. And with offering non-collateral to the clients will more happy to receive the energy efficiency projects. But still, we identify two common barriers here. It's about still lack of confidence from the clients is something that a crucial issues to be addressed. Again, a variety of the energy efficient technology, a variety of the technology providers creating uncertainty and lack of confidence to the client about the performance of energy efficiency. And second thing is that non-collateral loans is also providing high perceived risk in perspective of client. Again, in perspective of the lenders. Again, it is about the variety of the technology. So these two main barriers will be addressed with what we call it the risking instrument that's necessary to be deployed in order to accelerate the business transactions. So with support from the Energy Transition Partnerships, ATP, Climate Policy Initiative choose guarantee instrument as one of the most appropriate tools to accelerate the business transaction of the energy efficiency. We select a guarantee as the instrument. This guarantee acts as the tool to cover the delay payment in term of in case of the underperformance of the technology in certain of the seasons, because you know the performance of energy saving is up and down depending on the seasons. And the second is guarantee will act as defaults to cover the defaults of the client's payment to the lenders. So we expect to get the two benefits here. The first is to improve the confidence level of client because the performance of the energy efficiency somehow is covered by appropriate parties. And the second, for the potential bank that will support seeking for the energy efficiency projects, they will also confidence that the project will be, in case of the default and delay payment, will be covered by the appropriate parties. So that's probably the thought that we can share at this moment. Listens, and happy to respond if you have any follow-up questions.
No, I think that's the other thing is it ties in with the earlier question to Gloria and Russell. And Russell, if you want to come back, Arjun, if you had any thoughts around collaboration. So the role of governments and financial institutions working together. You know, how can the private sector kind of leverage this? So Eri, Arjun and Russell, if you had any thoughts on the kind of importance of collaboration, the roles of any lessons learned, I think we've got a minute or two before we need to hand back to Mel for the final wrap up. So I don't know if, Arjun, is that you waving your hand?
Yeah. So I think collaboration is absolutely key to be able to scale energy efficiency. And I think one of the key reasons for that is that for energy efficiency, to sell it and to service it successfully, relationships are very important. And also people are very important. So if you take our case, for example, we're looking at partnering with at least 5 large companies, in different areas, and we've already done so. For example, there's a utility company partnership. It's a private electric utility that sells energy to thousands of customers, and now they will sell energy efficiency services in partnership with us. Then there is a partnership with a facility management company. They are managing 3,000 sites. So for us, to try to get access to those sites ourselves is a very uphill task, whereas this facility management company already has them. Then we are talking about partnering with a couple of large OEMs, who are providing building automation solutions in the market. Then on the financing side, organizations like ADB, and then other European agencies that are interested in supporting sustainable transition on risk guarantee products and insurance products for energy efficiency. So I think it's absolutely essential to collaborate closely with the people who have a similar mission and similar ambitions to reduce energy consumption at a large scale. And we are certainly doing a lot on that front and encourage others to do the same.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, I think we've running almost out of time now. And again, I think this is, as is the way of these panels, it's opening up new conversations and making new contacts. So I'd like to hand back to Melanie Slade now to provide some closing remarks.
Many thanks, Alison, for the great moderation. Thanks to all the speakers for their insights and the richest of the range of conversations. I know people perhaps don't like the very short presentations, but it does give us the opportunity to cover a lot of interesting ground. We started out with the urgent need for energy efficiency, but let's face it, we've known that for a long time. Yes, we do have a new imperative at the moment because of the energy security crisis and high prices. So we need to grasp that and ride that wave of interest in energy efficiency. I talked about the political buy-in we got last week from 26 governments. So what's been interesting then in this later session is the business models that have been introduced that will try and help us get there. We clearly all need to do more. We need to scale up these business models. And I'd just like to say that from the IEA perspective, we'll be back in touch with everybody who's got these innovative ideas, and we'll try and get some more kind of roundtable workshops going so that we can actually pick out how we can really build on these things and accelerate at scale. But we're out of time now, so thanks very much everybody once again, and I look forward to ASEF next year. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.